Yeah, do it.
We want to go?
Hi, 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 hi.
All right.
Could I,
There we go.
can I have a mic? Oh, I should unmute the mic. Wait.
Okay. That's decent. I'll allow it.
Okay. Oh, on switch on the microphone. Okay. Thanks. No one tripped. Okay. Is that work? Oh no, you turned it. Okay, good guy.
Can everyone? Okay. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. So the idea really is just this is a small enough meeting. This is a small enough meeting of every lovely person here, and we're just going to have a conversation about the cool conversations that you have had over the last 3 days. And it can't center around money. If there's other topics that came up that are really cool, just the expertise of every person offering a talk or a panel or a performance or any offering that has happened over New Music Gathering and will happen over the next 4 days. We wanted to give everyone a chance to just have a big conversation with each other. We were going to have a structure, but we figured, I don't know, you're smart, chatty people anyway. So without a structure, we're gonna start talking. So maybe first we could go around the room and do the most micro introduction ever. And if you're on the YouTube stream, I don't know, in the chat, who are you? Where are you? Just do a little typey type in the chat. Okay, I'm Lainey. I'm one of the New Music Gathering organizers. I live in Brooklyn. I make music. Lately I sing and I do a lot of electronics. And I thought Stephanie and Ward's presentation was super inspiring, and I want to make consortiums. And I'd be curious to talk to more people about consortiums and how you feel about that.
Hi, I'm Vanessa. Probably know that already. I'm here at ACF. I live in St. John. I live in Minneapolis. We're in St. Paul, Minnesota. I'd love to talk about consortiums too. This is really interesting. I'm also doing a panel tomorrow about fundraising.
Woo!
I'm going to talk more about money.
I'm Busy, also known as George. Either one works. I am a composer. Just recently moved to St. Paul, originally from Montana, and I like animals.
Yeah. Yes.
I like animals. I have a horse.
What?
I'm Libby, and I have a horse. I'm Libby Meyer. I'm a composer and I teach at the Tech University at the UP, so I'm like about a squad north of we get 200 musicians every year. And my music has to focus on the natural world, obviously, because I live, and I'm also and fundraising and money.
Hi, Greg Oates. I'm a clarinetist. I teach at Iowa State University in Des Moines, Iowa. And I would love to talk about the different kinds of capital, particularly the kinds that are not fiduciary.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the words fiduciary.
No pressure.
My name is James Parker. I'm a composer, song artist, bandoneon player. My work is very improvised, lots of electronics. I'm interested in turning systems upside down and seeing what happens.
Hi, I'm Angelica, co-organizer of the Music Gathering. I live in Brooklyn, originally from San Juan, Puerto Rico. I love animals too. I have a dog named Needy. He's the best. I miss him. And I would love to talk about so many things, all the things that you mentioned, but also I've been thinking a lot about when Garrett spoke in the keynote about artists supporting other artists in a consistent way, monthly, and committing part of your income to that. That's something that I've been thinking a lot about.
Hello, I'm Mary Kanjian. I'm a co-organizer at Music Gathering. I'm also a composer and documentarian, and I'm an educator. I teach composition at Boston Conservatory at Berkeley. First time I get to
also really fascinated by this idea of actually budgeting a certain amount of money to support the arts.
I'm Adam Shoemaker. I'm Director of Education for Fillmore Keyboard Festival. I am part-time, as I call myself, a regularly always visiting instructor at Kalamazoo College, where I teach entrepreneurship and music theory and composition. I'm a freelance composer twice a year, about. And I love talking about money. If you came to my talk, that's how I do. I like showing my budgets to my classes and trying to be as transparent as possible. Just about things money, because it's hard enough. And yeah, I love it so much that my last piece, I actually used the Form 1040 for my lyrics. And I actually liked how it turned out.
Hello, my name is Maggie Malloy. I'm a radio host based in Seattle. I hosted an experimental music show called Second Inversion. I'm also interested in more transparency around money and conversations about art and music. So excited to be part of this conversation.
I'm Peter Gorman. I'm a composer, private percussion instructor, and a percussionist. And I'm here to learn more about how to talk about money, how to advocate for yourself, or for myself, and just hear what other folks' ideas are.
Hey everybody, my name is Haley Olson. I'm a composer, a conductor, a pianist, and I work at ACF in Artist Services. I live in beautiful St. Paul. I love all the conversations we've been having so far, and I'm even talking about art, but especially what Peter said, self-advocacy and letting artists be empowered to ask for money and help and fundraising, all that kind of stuff.
Hi, my name is Billy Lackey. I live here in St. Paul. I'm a music creator. Also working on the services at ACF with Haley. Also, like Angelica, I'm very interested in talking about artists supporting each other.
Hi, I'm Leonard. I'm a conductor. I'm a grad student at the University of Michigan. I'm conducting as a conductor of the Black Box Ensemble, which is a New York-based ensemble. And I am really interested too in talking about having more transparency in conversations about money, particularly for early career artists and projects and ventures.
Sorry, I came here late. What am I supposed to be saying?
Just a quick who you are and what you're curious to talk about.
Oh, cool. I am Jared Coffin. I'm a composer from St. Paul, and I'm interested to talk about similar, like early career, building your career to do more composing than other things.
I'm just going to say quick on the live chat. There's Lisa, who's the Executive Director of San Francisco Contemporary Music Players, joining you online from St. Paul. Lisa. There's Jean Overson listening from Canada. There's, I'm going to butcher this, I'm sorry, Charles Halka, composer listening from Bellingham, Washington. And there's a man named Danny Felsenfeld. Hi, Danny. Hi. Okay, so there's a lot of different things people mentioned wanting to talk about, but I think maybe Vanessa had a question.
Thank you. So this is something we've been thinking about. It's totally not a flush-out idea. This is a good pilot thing to talk about this way. So in terms of artists supporting other artists, we've been thinking about how do we not be the gatekeeper in these scenarios. Billy can tell you a lot about how we've really changed the curatorial process. Mary's been extremely involved in that as well. But one of the things we've been thinking about is this idea of a giving circle. This happens in other communities where they support each other, or if you have a strong affinity for a university or something that you were a part of, we've seen this work as well. And so we've been thinking about what could this be for you to pay, whatever, $5 a month to be part of this giving circle that enables another artist to get the much needed income for whatever it might be, developing childcare, health issues, whatever it might be. I think the biggest questions are, with this tape, would people be interested in being a part of this? And also, how do you determine who gets it in the most equitable way? I don't think first come, first serve, or even certain demographics, et cetera. We want to ask people for their 1040s either. So what are your thoughts on that idea? Just to put it out there.
Switch. Who put switches in there?
It's so bad.
I think it's a really cool idea as a giving circle. First of all, just I see lots of local and grant funding opportunities where I live in Kalamazoo, and some of these are like state funded or funded by other means. But when we have a community, and I feel like the new music community is not. It feels like a local community, even though it's national and international, and so that's one of the reasons why this gathering is cool. And so I think that with that in mind, it could definitely be used in that sense. They're giving circle to work. So I think it's a very cool idea, and I think if you're creating a community-based, maybe some sort of brainstorming or voting about what the circle is for, right? What's the funding for, and then go from once you determine that, you can kind of go from you can figure out how the selection process would happen based on maybe comments from the people that would want to be part of the circle. As we know, those things take a lot of time and effort to reach everybody, it sounds like a good idea, but it seems a lot of administrative challenges with that. But it could be cool.
I'm scared that the people who might need help the most or need funding the most might be like the least known with the fewest friends. Think about that for grants too. Like if someone's super talented with an amazing idea, but they're not known anywhere, and no one likes. I don't know. That's a sad scenario. But you know what I mean? Like I don't want it to be a popularity contest to get help. Yeah, so you can talk about other stuff. I mean,
Yeah, and if you think of other ideas, you know where to find me.
I don't think so. Oh yeah.
I have a thought about that. Just it makes me think to look at like agriculture and cooperative models and like how people come together with a shared purpose and then figure out like collectively how they can pool resources to do different things. Like maybe that's one outlet is to look that way. I don't know how that really plays out.
Yeah, and there's like certain communities where people will all pay into like a car that they all share to be able to do their work. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Sorry, I did the switch.
No one do the switch. On. Sorry.
Nope, I'm here. Okay. So yeah, yeah, exactly. And actually, I found some funder platforms that would be willing to work with us. We can get a match. I mean, there are some things existing. Again, not in music, but like for a certain community, people have all paid into buying a car together so they can do their work. So they can do certain jobs that they wouldn't otherwise be able to do and things like that. So I think it's pretty cool.
Lady.
I didn't touch this.
Thank you.
Now, adding on to that, is the thing I'm talking about with different kinds of capital. Perhaps it would be something that would be useful to put into not just donating money into something, but creating because there's other kinds of capital that people have in longer, short supply of time, particular skill set, ability to like code for websites. I mean, you can come up with a bunch of different things, and if you had people giving from where they had surplus into an area where someone had a need, it wouldn't just be because everyone's like money, like well, we all need money, but some people need more of it, some people have more of it. But then when we ask about all these other kinds of capital, I think it's really important, especially creating partnerships, because I think that the partnerships that are really useful are when you have a matchup of the excess in one person's capital and the deficit, and then match like a couple puzzle pieces.
Yeah, I really love the idea of the giving circle. I think one element that I would be really interested in contributing to on a monthly basis. And something I think is lacking in our world is just like seed funding. Like I feel like a lot of grants require like a documented history or 2 years of work or lengthy proposals and that sort of stuff. And that's great, especially when there's large amounts of money going out. But I do feel like there's a need in our field for smaller grants for performers and ventures that like $200, $400 could go a long way towards making something happen. And it's, I don't want to say a no strings attached sort of thing, but it's like, it's not contingent upon like a huge project or a guarantee of future success, but just like a little bit of investment in making something happen. And I feel like that would be something that's missing in our field that I would be really interested in contributing to the building.
I really appreciate that, and I think about the emphasis on it not necessarily being contingent on creating the music itself, because I especially think about how many people have needed emergency funding in the last year for things like rent, supplies. I just knew a journalist who missed her flight and had to pay a significant amount of money just to get another flight to be able to do her job, and it's sort of like, I feel like that emergency funding is really needed, and of course, you know, I think that it's great to have grant proposal skills and a documented history to submit, but you know, sometimes we just need rent or something like that. Really short notice.
Just quickly to jump on just an example of like immediate needs. I always found the immediate needs style grant to be really inspiring because it's a quick turnaround, and you know, we have a local one in Kalamazoo that's like $500, and they review it every month. And so like if something came up that you needed in like a couple months or less than 2 months, you know, there's still some time constraints, but you can apply for $500, and and they can get back to you within a relatively short amount of time about that. And so I find like in this community, you know, partly with administratively separate kind of like, you know, emergency, you know, actually health or, you know, just I need support versus I need artistic support. And I think those would be two different categories people could contribute to. But if on the artistic support side too, it's like, you know, if something came up that you could, you know, get a performance, or like somebody invited you to come and have a piece played, but you didn't have money to pay performers, or you didn't have a ticket to get there. You know, immediate needs could be really powerful in that sense, because then it would make people a little more mobile. You could try to get that immediate needs grant to make something happen that could be useful for your crew.
I'm gonna backpedal a little bit, just thinking about like how to like disperse money from this sort of thing. And something that Jared was saying about co-ops. I just love co-ops. I think they're the best. And like this is not an imperfect idea, and I just had it, so I'm sure it's got flaws. But like maybe there's some kind of nomination system amongst the people who are giving. So like people who are giving and say like, oh, I know this guy who's done this thing for me who could really use $1,000. He does this kind of work, he does yada yada yada. And then how many people submit nominations like that, and then there's some kind of vote or something. Then obviously it becomes really complicated if there's a ton of nominations, but maybe there's something there about some sort of like community decision making about who it goes to.
I feel like a lot of this should be the government's job. So I just thought it's, I don't know, maybe even outside of arts organizations, we could work to get people elected who think we should have health care and affordable housing. Because that shouldn't, I mean, ACF is like the superheroes of the world. What are you kidding me? I don't know, I just had a moment of like, wait a minute, you can't. It's a pandemic, it's not your job to like feed and house the people. But I forget if it was Adam or Haley or James, and someone said maybe, yeah, having like a 2-tiered system of like, there's arts funding, and then there's like, holy crap, I'm gonna lose my rent. I do think that's nice to keep it separate, because, you know, even if, like maybe if you're about to lose your rent, your arts portfolio is not gonna be as robust, or like you won't be in the headspace.
I mean, just to say the obvious, that it's completely obscene that we don't have a choice about funding the Pentagon. I mean, why can't we take a big chunk of that and use it to support creative work in this country?
I just want to say, we can all advocate. Also remember to thank your elected officials when they are showing up and making stuff happen. And we're getting more and more involved in that at the federal level through the Performing Arts Alliance, which I'm really excited about. But Will Robbins' article, you read it a few months ago in Music Box, it's what we got to do.
They're just holding it. I mean,
I didn't mean to.
wait, I actually have a question.
How do you all, I mean, I don't want to pry, but does this relate to how you all think about your charitable giving in general? Like, there's so many causes, so many people you know who need it, so many artists you want to support. Does that, like, your priorities, do you think of them as scaling up, or do you want to get a different set of priorities, or?
So, this is something I've been working on in like the last year, but just on my end, just on my decision-making process, I have like weird subcategories of places I give a small amount of money. So I have like a local radio station and they get $10. And I have Audubon because I love them and Go Birds and they get $5. And then I have local Patreon people that are working to make the beer community, because I also love beer,
Yes!
more equitable, and so it's not all bearded white guys. So there's more diversity in that, and just on the art side, just trying to make sure I support one of my friends every single month, either by buying a ticket or making a donation to a project and all of that. So I also would do that, the giving circle.
I do that too.
Yeah, I guess I just add on to that, showing up for your friends is like, I've thought about this many times. It's like, if I plan on asking people for money at some point and I haven't shown up for people, how could I expect them to do that for me and my ventures? And so I do think that, especially when we're trying to fund our own projects or that sort of thing, yeah, showing up for your friends and donating even small amounts, or your time, by the way. Like, I feel like I've spent a lot of time making like posters for people, even if I can't like chip in or whatever. Like donating your services in other ways. Yeah, it all comes around in the end.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that, and yesterday with Mary, we were talking about other ways besides money that also have value in which we can kind of support each other. And yeah, I was thinking like, things that you're good at, and we were talking about this also, just like the idea of it could be graphic design, but it could also be as simple as like if you're having a talk with someone about a commission, then being like, oh yeah, and that person is in the same group of that commission, then just being transparent of like, oh, this is what I'm getting paid, and that being also part of it's not mentorship, but it's, which mentorship is another great way of also doing that, but I think just it's transparency, and it's just finding other ways to make it more of something that is not taboo, or something that we're just open sharing. And that's, I think, really, really valuable, because someone might be losing a lot of money if they don't know what someone else is making in something similar. So I'm just curious about other ways, besides money, that you all either have felt supported or have you supported others.
I kind of want to talk about this because as a performer, it seems like I'm talking to composers all the time. We're trying to make a project happen. Because I work at a university, I feel like my ability as a performing musician is already supported. It's really already paid for. And so oftentimes I'm looking for a project and I'm not specifically looking to get reimbursed for the project. I see that as like the place where I'm putting my energy. And then oftentimes we have so much conversation about, oh, everyone needs to be paid for their time, forgetting that there are some people, I can count myself and some of my colleagues as well, whose time is paid for, and they're just looking for a project that they want to put the energy into. And so it's not always like, oh, you have to get this much money for the performers. Just find the performers who feel like they're already paid for and they want to put the energy into a good project. And I think we don't even realize that there are people who feel like that, perhaps. Or as a composer, we're thinking like, if I ask that, then am I going to have to do something for free? Well, not necessarily, because again, it's where the ability is. And so I'm saying that right now. If you have a really cool project and you need a clarinetist, like, come talk to me.
I kind of want to jump onto the, and I'm a little older. So I think there's a certain amount of pay it forward that has to happen. So like I have a university job. I'm really lucky. I did well this year, like, and I'm just going to say that. So like my Facebook feed was so depressing, just watching everybody. So you know, I'm in a really enviable position of being able to, you know, I run a little music series, and so I end up having a lot of people's music performed that aren't well-known names, because I think it's really important. I try to actually program people I've never heard of, or people that are young, or that sort of thing. So I think for those of us on this side of our careers, I think it's really important to be thinking about like the next generation coming up. And actually, I think it's harder now. I really didn't think it was a lot easier for me, although I am still paying off student loans. But I do think that there should be some of that, like, or that, like, I don't necessarily, like, I do things out of passion projects most often, like, that's what moves me, it's not money, unfortunately, so that's.
So sorry. Sorry, everyone on the stream. We're trying to get you better audio, but we also want you to be able to see. Anyway, that wasn't coming out for me. But, you know, on the subject of pay transparency, I think it's totally huge. And it's also another way that we can put pressure on organizations to do better. Is because if someone finds out how much someone else is getting paid and they're like, that's not acceptable, right? And they come into the negotiation empowered with that knowledge. It also puts pressure on that organization to increase its standards and to make sure that it's adequately remunerating artists for its service. And I was actually just going to say, I was just looking it up and didn't have a chance. There's a great organization called New Music Equity Action. I don't know if any of you have heard about this. But a couple months ago, I'm trying to find the post. They have a lot of really amazing things. There was a post about, I forget who was it Dorian who started the pay transparency?
Oh yeah.
Dorian's.
Woo!
Oh, great. Awesome. Okay, so you'll hear all about it. And I was just going to say there is actually like essentially a crowdsourced spreadsheet where everybody can post how much they've been paid by organizations or institutions for which services. And again, that information, knowledge is power, right? That information is so important. And I know people who've gotten paid more than, they've gotten paid what they should be paid, or closer to what they should be paid, much more than what an institution initially offered, because they had knowledge about, you know, what the going rates were and what other people have in the system. So anyway, I think that pay transparency is an incredibly important thing, and if we all come together, then we should be that knowledge. And then the other thing that I was going to say about working for free when we can, which I love, and I love that I'm also now in a position where I can do this type of stuff for free. Is what's interesting is I've actually gotten pushback by other professionals. So there are other documentarians who actually have called me out for working for free because they said, you're devaluing my services as a professional by working for free. And like, obviously I have a lot of very complicated feelings about that because I feel like I'm in a position where I owe it to my community to be able to work for free, but I also do understand that, for instance, I don't know how many of you have ever worked with an engineer before. It's someone who has professional engineer certification, and they actually have to sign a pledge saying that they will not work for free. And so they're very, very interesting. I realize obviously the arts are not engineering, but as we're having these conversations, I do think it is interesting to compare with other fields as to what their MOs are, and what types of services they're remunerated for, what types of services they have to agree to not provide for free because, you know, it might devalue art for somebody else because of competition. So anyway, just interesting things to think about. I support working for free when you can, and we're finding other ways, as Greg was saying, of remunerating, or not remunerating, of contributing to the community in other ways, but not everybody in the music community is super supportive of that. So make sure, that's again, why we need to talk about it. That's why it's really important to have this conversation. So.
I would love to pose a question, regardless of your discipline or how you identify in music making. Maybe just if we could take a moment to think, what are the parameters that we do consider when we set our rate from project to project? I'm asking this because I myself know I have a very wide range, from things like Tina had mentioned of doing things for free, or oftentimes, I think in this past year, especially with a lot of micro commissions that were happening and considering the state of our world socially this year, a lot of those commissions I would say, actually, just don't pay me whatever you're going to pay me. Please donate to a different organization right now. But at the same time, there are projects where I'm charging exactly what I feel my value is, or higher, because oftentimes an old professor had told me, this is when I was doing a lot of film music, and people kind of just don't really listen to your music. They just hire you from conversation in a way. And she had said, the only way people will know that you're valuable is by what you quote them for your fee. So quote them more than you would even want to accept for a project, and they'll know that you're worth it. So just with those thoughts, project to project, what are you considering when you quote your rate?
I have a lot of feelings about working for free. I'm in a position where I don't have to have the income. But like Tina mentioned, you know, there's a certain protection that I want anybody who is in the field doing the work to have. Well, I want the organizations, people that are hiring, to know that it costs something, right? And so, you know, I have done work where I've told them the rate, and I have donated that back, so they actually do give me a check. But I say, you know, here's the money back, but it's come from my bank account, so it's a write-off, and you know, it's basically just preserving that income, and the organization got a bonus, or the person got a bonus. In terms of like rate size, like, you know, I just told you my last commission on Thursday or Friday, but I did it for free, right? But I told my friend who I did it for, you know, what I normally charge. But I said, we'd love to do it as long as you promise to perform it multiple times, you know? And he was like, oh, absolutely, you know? And I think I would feel differently if it was an organization, because as I said before, organizations have budgets. Oftentimes my colleagues don't often have flex money to hire, you know, commissions just for themselves as performers. Who I also know are, you know, performers that are challenging themselves to make ends meet the same way. So all of the people I've talked through money and gathering, or I guess rate setting, highly dependent on what you're quoting for, right? Super dependent, like, to the point where, like, if an organization is hiring you, sometimes I look up the Form 990 of the organization and see how flush they are, right? And I do make judgments on it based on what I think they can afford, versus an organization that might be more passionate and has less to work with. I know it's a little, maybe it makes people feel uncomfortable, but at the same time, you know, if an organization is fiscally responsible and has grown their funds to where they have the money to do things, then a $10,000 commission should not be a big deal, and they should be able to hire somebody at that level. And what I've seen a lot too, they should be able to pay local people to do some of the things at maybe not the famous composer rate, but a decent rate instead of a low volume. So it's a big spectrum, but a lot of educated guessing. And sometimes just, for me, you kind of keeping that base rate, but then saying, well, I'll discount it for you. So you know that you're giving them a deal in some way, shape, or form. And I kind of talk a little too long on that, but I think it's fascinating, just like the perception. And I'll say like one of my biggest commissions I have to date, completely inexperienced, was from a medical company, Stryker. They make hospital beds. And this was a marketing person's project, and I was like 24. I had no idea what I was doing. Like, we want 2 hours of music. And I was just like, what do I ask? Like, this company is like a millions of dollars and just flying out. And this one marketer of a whole team, like a whole floor of marketing people, is wanting to do this passion project. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna ask for a ton. I said $12,000. And I said, okay. I was like, which was still amazing at the time. Like, it paid off debts. Like, I threw out all my debt, and there it went. Bonus, But it was like, I had no idea, but I just thought I was going big, So.
I think that's a really good point because I approach any collaboration or work that I create with another musician that's kind of like at my stage totally differently than what I would ask for from an organization, especially because I think I was lucky to kind of get the advice of like seeking out your peers and finding people who are really passionate about your music and to really kind of make it a true collaboration. So I do expect, a certain number of performances. I feel like if a friend of mine were able to have a really open conversation about it. But I've just seen so many opportunities from organizations, big and small, where it's so clear that they're taking advantage of this music creators' maybe lack of experience with this type of commission, and even if they are paid a decent amount of money, maybe they still have to pay to fly out for the performance and they're expected to be there, or maybe it's just a one-off and the piece will be performed one time and then they'll never even get a recording. And so I think it's really important to just know your worth. I was really lucky pretty early on in my compositional career to get what I consider to be a pretty big commission, definitely not a $12,000 commission, but one where I was like, there's always hope for the future. But it was an amount where I was like, oh wow, people can pay you that much to make music, and I think that kind of shifted the way that I've seen, every subsequent commission from an organization after that, because it's like I know that you could probably be paying more. I don't think it's uncomfortable to look at the organization's stats and their income, because I think you should be empowered to negotiate. I think that's maybe a question I have too, like how do we start that conversation about letting artists advocate for themselves?
As someone who just went through sorry, I'm going to turn this way so I'm facing away from the speaker. As someone who just went through a negotiation process for like a academic job, I was actually in a fellowship program for the past year, and we actually had a whole seminar on negotiation, which was something that I had never even thought I would have access to. I mean, I'm sure everybody's written books about it and whatnot. But one of the things, this is the most powerful question that I've learned in that seminar. And I think obviously there are gendered and racialized aspects to this conversation too that make this process much more complicated. And not just gender and race, there's so many other factors, right, that enter into this class. And so the most powerful question that I learned was, can you tell me more about where that number came from? Because I had asked the question, like, how do you even enter into a negotiation? And most of the time, people actually expect you to negotiate. This was something that I hadn't realized. They expect you to negotiate, especially for job offers, right? Like, they come in offering you like pretty much the least amount of money that they expect to be able to get away with. So they expect you to negotiate. And so I was like, how do you even start that process? Ask them where the number came from. You're not coming across as affronted
argumentative or belligerent or, you know, just you're asking a simple question. And she's like, lots of times the way that they respond to that will tell you a lot about what your future that was like the best thing that I could have possibly heard at that juncture in my career, and it helped so much. In fact, to the point where like when I came into that negotiation, I asked that question and they immediately gave me $10,000 more.
Wow!
Wow! Yeah, can you tell me a little bit more? Well, and then you got that number. And they're like, well, how would you like me to put it? And we're done. At which point then I was like, Sam, I should have asked for more money.
Yeah, just kind of thinking about negotiations, not only with money, but the amount of work that you do and what is expected of you. One thing that happened to me a few years ago was I never thought I would have a career as an orchestral composer, and all of a sudden a few orchestras coming for me to write pieces for them, and I was like, oh yeah, $10,000 to write a piece, great. But then I had to do 10 community workshops. I had to do 3 board things and just like so many other things, which I love doing. I love community engagement and education, but then realizing that there were other white male counterparts that were most likely being paid either the same or more without all the other many little things, or that felt really huge actually, that also take a lot of money and that you have to somehow tie into the commission. It's just, which obviously this is an equity thing too, because it's, and I also recognize that part of the problem, especially with me not even realizing that, because I did not realize that at the time, it took me years, was that I was just grateful to have a seat at the table and grateful to be invited to write for an orchestra. But just being aware and mindful of your value, not only as an artist, but also as a teaching artist, also as a mentor to other young composers, all the other things that sometimes, especially with orchestras or big organizations, it comes in commissions, just considering that too as part of the negotiation process. And also maybe being like really good of education, being like, I would love to write this piece, right now I don't have the bandwidth, or to also do this other component of it, and then you'll also find out if they really want you for your music too. So just another thing that I think a lot about.
I'm dying to say this thing. I think you're all famouser than me, because there's no big organizations and there's no like negotiating, whatever. It's friends. I'm always writing for friends. I'm not comfortable negotiating with friends. I guess I should, but I'm not comfortable being like, I don't know. Hey, Greg Oaks, I want you to commission me for $8 million. Okay. But a conversation that I've started having with friends is, well, how much money is there for the whole thing? Like, how much is everyone? And that sounds like a friendly question. Like, not even show me your budget or show me your like global operating budget, but just like, oh, you want to commission me for this concert? Are you paying yourselves? Like, what? Like, just like over coffee chats? Maybe that's a negotiation, but I'm basically never in the situation of like a symphony wants to commission, or like what's it, like a cool medical I don't know, whatever. Like, I'm not in that situation. It's my friends I went to school with and I cook with, and it's, you know, I've done commissions for like, buy me a fancy omakase dinner, because I'll never do that for myself. But no one was making any money, and we pooled money to rent the hall for the premiere, and I felt okay about that because I checked with Yasha, this is okay. I make $78,000 a year, which is a huge, which I make a huge amount of money compared to what I made like even 5-6 years ago. And I think all the time about what Tina's saying about like, well, there's composers I think who will hate that I'm like, buy me dinner, or I'll make you dinner, thanks for playing my music. But if it's no money, if no one's making any money, then I think I feel better, because like otherwise I'm saying you don't deserve to have music. Like, you have no money, therefore you don't deserve to have people hurt. I don't know, maybe I'm thinking of it wrong, but since I'm writing for people I know and I trust to be good people and good practice, if there was money, either I'd get it or they'd be giving it to good people. But since I have that salary, Leonie, can I ask you a question?
No, Mary.
I
don't talk to Mary. She knows it.
We talk about money all the time.
Yeah, we do.
We I'm always like, hey, you need to work for your music. It's amazing. But there's value to your work. So I wonder, even amongst friends who have, let's say you have no money and you're collaborating on a project, of having the conversation of saying, I feel like my work is worth this much. You feel like your work is worth this much. What can we do to support our work?
But then
How
it's
can-
writing a grant.
I know. Maybe it's not also. I don't know. Maybe it's those little weird Venmo QR codes all over a Penske truck like we have over here. I don't know what it looks like.
Guys, look at our Venmo code on the Penske shirt.
By the way, nice plug. Donate to the New Music Gathering.
Everyone donate to New Music Gathering. You two guys
But
over there.
I guess, yes, there are those projects that we do for free, but I worry when that becomes the standard for ourselves. Even if we have something stable like teaching or insert any other job that supports our income. I'm going to slightly derail this conversation though, because my mind is going to so many great things that people were saying around negotiation. A few things. One, I have found, first, I feel pretty comfortable with what I quote people at. I feel like I finally shed that fear of, oh my God, I'm going to ask too much and then they're not going to want to work with me. Because 100% of the time, I haven't learned my lesson, 100% of the time when I've asked for something, people have said, yes, we will find a way, which either means I'm quoting insanely low, or it just means if someone wants to work with you, they will find a way to work with you. A few things that you can negotiate, though, as I've discovered, is let's say you do quote something and they say, oh, we just don't have that for the season that we're imagining you for. Okay, negotiate the season. Could we imagine that for 2 or 3 years from now? Okay, if we only have that amount, then maybe the piece is half as long. Maybe it's with half as many players.
Do you do that with friends?
I do it with friends. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because you do have to think about your work and the energy that you're putting towards something. And hopefully, I would imagine all of us here as musicians are putting our entire selves into our projects. And we aren't thinking about the money while we're doing it, but also we're making choices and compromising other things that can make money while we're creating. So it has to kind of work on your own terms. The other thing I was going to say, and Angelica, you slightly brought this up, is it has been so invaluable to me to have a group of people who either have collaborated with similar individuals or organizations where I could just email or call and say, hey, what did you get? What did you get on that commission? Just so I know where to start. And I've never, ever had somebody say that they're uncomfortable sharing what they make. So I will say, hey, you too. If there's someone that I've maybe worked with that you're working with or will work with and you want to know, hey, how much did you charge? Just send me a note. My email address is on my website. I'm happy to share.
She's the only Mary June composer I know.
So far.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, like, the friend thing, right? You know, what Mary said about the next season or planning ahead, like, I'm in the middle of one of those conversations right now. It's not even a friend, just a performer, right? And I'm just like, well, I'll help write the grants because that's a skill set I possess, you know? If you can find the grants, right? If you can find the grants for your area, like, I'll look it over if that's going to pay me, right? I know you don't like writing grants.
I hate it. Like I feel like I've bought my way out of writing grants. Like I used to have to write them and not get them. And now I'm like, wait, why have the salary if I have to spend my life writing grants and not gonna get it? I hate it though.
And, you know, but you know that encouragement of for me the point is the encouragement of the performer, of the friends, to look for funding and to help them look for funding and say, hey, you should pay these people, me included, and look for funding to make it happen. It's something I do in practice. Like a lot of my own premieres, I self-fund them. I pay my performers with grants. I rent the venue. I pay my sound engineer. And my goal is to not go broke and to get a great recording and hopefully a decent to great performance, you know? And it's but I write the grants for it and I invite people in, and those have led to people inviting me back into their projects, which I think kind of goes back to what Greg was talking about too. Just like what can we do with our power to share? That's one way, is to write grants and pay people for even producing your own stuff.
I just want to give you another perspective.
I know that I'm a terrible person.
No, listen. I remember you from a grant proposal that you submitted. I think it was Brooklyn Arts Council maybe 10 years ago.
No.
I remember.
No.
So you never know who's listening and who's reading and discovering you. And this is the joy I have to sit in on Billy's panels to be able to discover artists that maybe they get the award, maybe they don't, but we remember the people that really stick out, and we, there's something else down the road. So I just want to let you know, it's not for naught. Yeah, and also just for anybody that doesn't know, this may have come up already in some of the other panels, but if you want to see the 90 form for a nonprofit organization grant, thank you, guidestar.org. It's free, you just have to sign up. And as a nonprofit, you're legally required to show all your financials, so you should be able to see that, as well as your top executive salaries. So you can find mine too. Oh, one other thing, so sorry, really quick. Well, never mind. For organizations, we often do what's called in-kind support. You've probably heard of that. So like if a lawyer is helping us with their legal support for free, we use that as in-kind support. I would really recommend keeping a grant proposal to include in-kind support. It's not free. It's never free. Free is complicated, right? Also, the visibility equity is huge. So think about when you're negotiating terms that part too.
To kind of turn the question of like how much you're charging in negotiation, I don't know if anyone has experience with it in this group, but doing a consortium commission, I wonder if anyone has experience like how much you are asking people to join into a project, and how much that is happening.
Yeah, I've done a number of them for different types of ensembles. Wind ensembles this is very, very popular with wind ensembles. And in general, the number is typically, I would say, depending on the size and depending on how ambitious, I have to watch what I say, how ambitious the anchor supporter of the consortium is, the lead commissioner. I mean, I would say with most college wind ensembles, they ask $50 to $100 for a buy-in, and they try to get together, they'll try to get together maybe 20 wind ensembles, right? And so that's how they're able to offer the thousands of dollars that are necessary, right? Theoretically, for someone to spend the amount of time. And I mean, another thing you can negotiate is copying costs. The vast majority of commissions now actually say, and if we do not pay for copying costs. And what's very, very interesting is there's one of my colleagues at a different institution writes all of their music by hand and then hires someone else to copy out the parts and engrave the parts. And I think there's still a lot of people who do this. But what's very interesting now is for many of us, like, we can't afford that because the commissions don't give you money for that anymore. Like, I don't know, I guess that used to be a thing, but not in the time that I've been a composer. So it's very, very interesting now to see how that has shifted. So that's actually another thing that might also be interesting to start negotiating. Maybe collectively, if we all start pressuring organizations to start paying for that again, to make art. So, yeah. I have a theory.
I have a theory that our generation has removed copying costs from our own work because we do things for free, because we have technology and we say, look, it's just extracting hurts, right?
But we all spend a week.
But we spend it forever and it's a lot of work, and then when you actually give it to a copyist, they ask for about 50, well, at least the ones I've talked to, ask for about 50% of your copying or your commissioning fee. And so few ensembles engage with copying costs that this really scares them when you ask for it. So something that I have learned to do with some success and some failure is we settle on the commissioning fee, and then we have a line in the contract that says that the commissioner in good faith will work towards securing that copying fee, and there's a timeline for that, and generally people really do try to make that happen.
Yeah. But that's a great example, of how people,
That's a great example of how people, stream. You don't need to see that. That's not the shot we all want. That's a great example of how, in a way, supply and demand, right? We took away the demand for copy and cost because either we didn't think we were worth it or we were just saying yes to everything. And so it stopped being something that was offered to us. So that's another very interesting side of this prism, right? Is to think about if we stop asking for what we're worth, long term, how does that affect what is eventually offered? So there's kind of a long game here too about what about the next generation of composers? How are our practices going to impact whether or not they're going to be adequately remunerated for their work? So it's tough, you know? These are tough conversations and questions to have, especially when many of us, the vast majority of us are trying to make our art from a place of scarcity, I think, in terms of just the fiscal reality of our lives. Again, as you said earlier, shouldn't be that way, but given the government system that we've been handed in terms of how they, anyway, longer conversation.
Yeah, well, I was thinking that same thing because that's like what Angelica said about taking this commission for an orchestra, and then all of a sudden you have 10 other things you have to do in addition to the commission. And it's sort of like what you were saying with grant writing, like you're doing this extra grant writing on the side too. It's like, are you counting all of this in your commission fee? Because I think the reason I hate writing grants is because you could spend pour endless time into this grant and you don't get it, and it feels like time lost, you know? Yeah. Maybe it helps you in a small way to the next grant, but like, I feel like that is the thing that drives me crazy about grant writing is just that it's like, yeah, there's no guarantee that you'll even get anything for that time. So yeah, I'm just curious, when you think about your commissioning costs, do you factor in all the time that you spend doing these extra activities? Copying, grant writing,
ACF
events?
Not ACF for me, somebody had a table of commissioning fee.
Yeah, Meet the Composer and New Music Battle, right? That's the calculator? Yeah, where you pick like opera for 3 hours and it's like
it's like I am like
big range.
There's no institutions commissioning me to do anything. If I want to write a piece, like I'm making it happen.
At least I could go to it and go.
I'm an emerging composer, I would say, which is a silly term, I think, but it's gonna be really fun. But also, I work 3 days a week in a very fancy restaurant, and like that's how I make money. So like, and I love working in restaurants. It's very fun. I drink lots of really lovely wine. And so I do the projects that I want to do, and I don't have to do that, right? And so that's very cool, and I like it a lot, and it's not stressful, which is very fun. And I also hate writing for parents, but on the other hand, it's kind of what you're talking about. I love applying for stuff because it like forces me to like clarify my ideas and like what I'm talking about. And that's like to me is like very valuable. It's like I have a big idea about something, and then after I have a page-long proposal about it. Now at the end of it, it's like, oh, I really have an idea of what I'm talking about. All of a sudden, it's kind of simple. Oh, I applied to a lot of arts residencies, and they ask for like
Y'all remember that calculator? Or like, how many minutes, how many people, how much, did that help people? No, Mary hates it. Mary, why did you hate it? Because that doesn't work. It just doesn't work. We could have this debate of, is it fair to have a standard rate for commissions, but ultimately, I just don't think that that's possible. I very specifically remember an instance in which I was commissioned to work with a youth orchestra, and that was the largest ensemble I had ever written for, so I went to that calculator, and the calculator said charge $30,000 for the orchestra, and I thought, it's a children's youth orchestra in Brooklyn. Like, there's no way. Like, that $30,000 that funds education for so many students. And there's no way that would be part of their commissioning fee, and ultimately it wasn't. It was like $3,000.
But you can
10% of that.
But like you can negotiating process, you can like I'm terrible at negotiating. You can externalize and be like, look, I know this is ridiculous. You're not going to be able to pay me this, but here's this objective. We have calculators should be crazy high, so we can go. Just so you know, this thing exists. It could be a.
But I think anything that puts a standard on a project is just unrealistic to me. Like, where did that number come from? That's where
Where does any number come from? Like, I used a math tutor. I shouldn't say used to. This year, I math tutored. That pays a stupid amount of money in New York City for my not even full bachelor's in mathematics. I got like my highest paying gig I think was $160 an hour. Right? That's ridiculous. Who sets that price? And there are people doing it, like one town away, way more qualified than me for like $40 an hour. These things are, I perceive it to be so artificial. I mean, this calls back kind of to James's thing today, like, I don't know, Marxism and how we define value and commodification of labor, but like, none of these numbers mean anything. It's how much you need to like live and sustain you and what's the mark, I don't know what does.
Because I wonder, okay, so let's take that calculator model, for instance. So that's saying that a longer, larger piece is worth more than a shorter piece that requires fewer forces with that particular model.
Which is arbitrary, but anything you pick is going to be arbitrary. Unless it's genuinely like, how long does it take Mary Kuyunji and to write this piece? And was it fun? And did you hate it?
But I actually don't even think it's how long does it take me to make something?
Or like
how
easy or hard was it?
Or none of that even. I think it's what is the value that I'm putting on this artistic work?
But how do you put that value?
Like me personally?
Yeah, you personally.
I think this goes to all of the different factors of considering, like you were saying, like is it a larger institution? Is it for a friend? Is it XYZ?
Yeah.
Because then you think of something like insert famous artist that takes to something that takes like 2 seconds, but has quite a lot of value, right? So now I'm rambling.
No, but
I have no thoughts.
This is what we do. This is just what we do.
I do want to talk about.
I like Lainey's idea that money is absurd.
Yeah.
It's at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of numbers, right? It's just a bunch of people doing math, basic math, really basic math, and that's empowering because you can also just drop a big fat number for somebody else who has big fat numbers. And they're used to dealing with big fat numbers, so your big fat number is not a big deal, right? I mean, if an org has 4 zeros after a project, they're like, cool, 4 zeros, and the number in front of it. If an org only has 1 or 2 zeros, they're like, I can do that, 1 or 2 zeros, behind that number. There's a certain empowerment in realizing like who's dealing with what capacity, and being able to negotiate with that in mind for just the number. Keeping in mind that you all have very different numbers for living. And not just like existing bare minimum, but like what you want to do and how you want to live and what's important to you. Sometimes they don't have numbers, right? Some of the things they need to do, but at the end of the day, money is just a bunch of numbers.
I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking, but just say this one more thing. Something we've been talking about at ACF also is related to the questions you should be asking as part of the initial conversation before you get to negotiation, like just learning about the context of the opportunity and like Angelica was saying, like the community engagement. But I think there's another layer that we haven't talked about, and we can talk about this more urgently, I'll say, since learning about the Tulsa Opera and getting Bernard Remain, which is what is the expectation of this composer, and is this in the context of Black Lives Matter, the Tulsa Massacre? What is that equity for that artist to participate, and how do they make sure that they're being valued for their art? Again, how do we make sure that conversation is really about a collaboration that is equitable, that values that artist, and is the fee as well as that amount of participation, but then the what ifs, like what if it ends up being streamed? What if it ends up being, issued on commercial recording? And all of those questions, I mean, that's kind of where we landed, right? It's just, what are those questions? Because we can't say that there's this baseline you should be asking, but we're going to add your question if you don't mind. It's a resource. But yeah, So I'd love to hear just other questions you think should be brought forward in that conversation.
Well, I was gonna say another part of this that I don't think has been touched on yet is actually payment schedule. Do you get a deposit? This is something that I think is hugely important. And of course, this then allows for a very important conversation about contracts and what happens if either party defaults on their side of the contract, right? But I think that that's something that's actually, like, I've definitely done these documentation gigs where I've said, if you can pay me in cash the day of, I'll give you like a 30% discount. Because I was like, I've definitely been in situations where I was like, I drove from CA to LA and I needed to get paid in cash for that day or else I wouldn't have money to buy gas to get home. And so I was like, I will give you a discount if you can give me cash now. Right? But when it comes to commissions, sometimes you need a hefty deposit for that piece, right? And I think most commissioners now are at the point where they'll give you half, or 40%, right? Upfront or upon execution of this document, which is never that. Usually it's a month after that, which always blows my mind. They're like, you already defaulted on your contract. Why are you breached the contract by not giving you my check right now? My favorite was once someone, I sent them the email with the signed contract and they then moved me money immediately. And I was like, thank you! This is how this should work. But especially when you're dealing with like large educational institutions, it's probably going to take you 6 weeks, right? After any people have signed to get a check from them. So in any case, the payment schedule is something that's really important to talk about and potentially negotiate as well. So that's another thing that might enter into this.
Yasha has a story about payment schedule. Your friend, the drum circle teacher. I love this story. Bag of masks. Aw, hey baby. That's bag. Cover them up.
This is not my story. I wish I was this cool, but I have a friend back in the day who kind of bootstrapped his life up into being a full-time kind of family circle facilitator guy. So he would do workshops in like schools and old folks' homes and prisons and places like that. And schools in particular were bad at making him definitely on the day, and sometimes it would just take a little. For a while, I was helping him do this, and I witnessed him. He would finish the workshop, and he'd take all of his drums into the office, and he'd be like, "Okay, great, I'm ready for the check." And then they'd be like, "Oh, we have to do X and Y, and it'll take a few weeks." So I was like, "I got that." And he sits down with like 80 drums in the office. He's like, "What was that?" It's just like looked at his watch. I was like, I can wait.
And it works.
So if you have 80 drums, then you can physically get into the space.
But it works, right?
Yeah.
It works. They can pay you on time.
Just wanted to say a tiny thing about going back to the idea of creating, like artists supporting artists, but also creating like a sustainable ecosystem in which we're reminding ourselves, even friends, of our value too. It's something I just started doing, but I'm oftentimes in a position of like, I have a deadline, let's say it's a solo piece, and then I get super insecure about like, is this not possible, and then I'm like really afraid to reach out to the commissioner or to the person that is performing it, and then, but I have a friend that's brilliant that might be awake at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. And then being like, Shelly, can you please check if you can play this on the saxophone? I can pay you $150 for proofreading, and you just mark the thing. And like doing that, especially for solo pieces, I mean, ideally, you are doing that, and we talk about good collaboration, and that the ideal process is like you're doing that with a person. But I find myself oftentimes feeling very insecure about going to that person and feeling, which is another conversation, but just like leaning onto your friends. I've been doing that for a long time, but now I'm trying to be better at like, can you do this? I know it's super last minute. I have this amount to pay you. I know it's little for what you can do, but just kind of, I think that's a way of myself, of reminding ourselves that this has value, even if it's, you know, very, like it's close friends. I think it's,
This is like a half-formed thought. If someone wants to finish it for me later and tell me about it, that would be great. But it seems like there's at least like two kinds of culture going on here, right? And I think they're both wonderful. And there's one that I've heard a lot of people say where it's like a passion project, right? So it's like a composer and a performer just kind of working on a thing, making it happen, and they kind of, you know, they get whatever kind of video they can get, and they make it happen however they can. And that's, I think to me, that's kind of like folk music. Like traditional, like think about your sort of like ridiculously oversimplified, you know, idealistic vision of what folk music probably was pre-industrially, right? It's like people in the community making music for the community, probably not writing grants to do that, right? So like the new music version of that looks like it's all of this sort of pro bono passion project stuff. I think by necessity, that's going to always be limited, right? That's not going to really extend past your friend circle. It's not really a passion project anymore. It's like, I don't even know the ensemble. So that's one level of culture that we all participate in. And I think we've all experienced, like, you know, the thing that you did when you were sort of like younger and you did stuff for free, it was a passion project, but it maybe got some attention and then other people started contacting you because of that. So like, you know, that could parlay into like the other level of culture, which is the more kind of like institutionally funded, like people who don't know you actually approaching you in a kind of market situation, saying like, we would like to pay you for your people and stuff. I think we all work on both those levels. And I think they look the same, right? There's a poster and a concert and you go and you listen to it and you leave, and it's like you can't sometimes even tell which level you're participating in as an audience member. And I think that can maybe create confusion with like, there's this idea that, oh, I should only exist in the market version, right? Like that's the real one. Or, oh, I should only exist in the kind of like folk music one because that's the like, you know, I don't want to lose my soul. Like, I think these are false dichotomies. I think they're both happening, and I think they're both valid, and they work in different ways. And we all know composers who like move to New York and only play concerts in New York. And I don't think that is bad, but it means that you're not going to get very well known. But you're participating in the kind of background hum that creates the environment for other people to get ideas of maybe do other things. Like, I think that's a whole. You're still participating, right? Whatever level you're working at in that moment in your life. I think that's fine. Anyway, you want to finish that thought? Tell me how it goes. Yeah,
Speaking of, we should probably wrap it up soon, so if people have a couple more thoughts, it's cool, but we gotta get over to Studio Z, the amazing Heather and Zeitgeist and Sonoma.
Before you do that, if everyone could just take like one chair or two chairs and get them off the stage.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you.
Final thoughts? I have a final thought. Okay, my final thought.
Oh my god. My final thought, this is for you too, YouTube. My final thought is just, this was an amazing conversation, and maybe we can keep having it. Like, just because, like, oh, we're going to go hear the amazing concert in Studio Z. If you're not comfy in social media, like, what do we, like, Mary and Angelica come over for dinner, and, like, Danny comes over, and we eat sandwiches, and we talk about this stuff, and we've known each other for ages, so there's trust, and we can be really frank. Maybe start with your inner circles of frank trust, lovingness, and then work out from there. But I really believe that every environment gets better. I mean, this is the Adam Schumacher like poster thing, right? If we all just talk about money, if we just talk about money super frankly all the time, we just gotta believe it'll get better for all of us. We just okay. That's my final thought. Take a chair, everybody. Thank you, YouTube people. I'm gonna stop the stream. You two YouTube people, talk to each other. YouTube people, you are so quiet. You're so quiet. It's just me and Danny.
Oh, look at all
I know, I was on it. It's like Danny. I'm Danny. Laney, Danny. Where'd you go, Lisa? Where'd you go, Brian Mark? Where'd you go? Anyway, yeah, hi Brian Mark. Anyway, love you guys. Keep chatting. Talk to you soon.